From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I am Estefania Bravo, and this is From the South. We start with breaking news in Colombia, where the jailed leader of the FARC, Jesus Santrich, has been just released from prison. These are live images from outside La Picota prison in Bogota. Earlier in the day, Santrich was seriously wounded but is reportedly in stable condition. Soon after this news broke, Bogota's Regional Supreme Court ordered that Santrich be released immediately. The dramatic turn of events comes just 2 days after the Special Jurisdiction for Peace, the court dealing with Colombia's peace process, turned down the U.S. extradition request. The GEP ordered his immediate release, but despite protests inside and outside the Picota prison, where Santrich was being held, the authorities refused to free him previously. President Iván Duque strongly criticized the order to release Santrich, and the leader of Duque's party, former President Álvaro Uribe, says the FARC leader will be extradited. A number of prisoners who are members of the FARC political party have been holding peaceful protests in support of Santrich. They held a banner reading, quote, "Dignity cannot be persecuted, killed, or jailed. Free Santrich."
Colombian Justice, the Attorney General's office, the judges who requested Santrich's extradition have already proven the crimes were committed after the peace accords were signed. He must be extradited. Within our party, we know that President Duque is making the right decision in accordance with our laws. In the end, Jesus Santrich will be extradited.
Senator Sandra Ramirez from the FARC party is now at La Picota prison demanding answers from authorities about Jesus Santrich's condition.
We are outside La Picota prison to demand information about our comrade Jesus Santrich due to the all various news we've received. But above all, we are here to take him with us, because in a country that respects the rule of law, Santrich will already be free. His freedom and well-being are an urgent matter.
Moving on, the Venezuelan Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza has confirmed that the first steps of dialogue with the opposition have been taking place in Norway. He said the talks in Oslo were good news for everyone and caused the so-called Lima Group to suspend its next meeting. Arreaza was talking in an exclusive interview with Telesur.
We are very grateful to the Kingdom of Norway, to their government and their foreign ministry. We are grateful for the work done here in Caracas between both sides and for the work being done in Oslo. Both sides have come together. This is really good news, and we must highlight that, because dialogue and respect for democracy are good news. This is the only way we can find a solution to our current political situation. What we are seeing in Venezuela is an ongoing historical conflict, and we must be able to handle it with respect. Respect for the Bolivarian Constitution and for our institutions, with respect for Venezuela's sovereignty and guaranteeing peace in our nation.
And Minister Arreaza also highlighted that Venezuelan authorities have been pushing for dialogue with the U.S. government, adding that their strategy to besiege Venezuela have so far failed.
We hope that the U.S. understands our stance. We have sent messages to them saying that diplomacy must be respected. We have said this to Mike Pompeo, to Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. We've told him that it's time to restart diplomacy. All their strategies have failed. They are trapped in a maze with no exit. They have been stumbling over and over again. We are ready and willing to have talks, to sit down and reestablish respect.
And Venezuela's President Nicolás Maduro has met with representatives of the International Contact Group as part of his government's efforts to advance a dialogue with the Venezuelan opposition. The Contact Group also held meetings with various political parties and diplomats in the Foreign Ministry in Caracas. They discussed international law and sovereignty and talked about setting up a dialogue and how to pressure the United States to lift unilateral sanctions against Venezuela. The International Contact Group is made up of the European Union, Ecuador, and Costa Rica, among others. And let's take a look at how Venezuela's new financial and commercial architecture with allied countries is working as it seeks to supply its demand for medicines and other hospital supplies. Leonel Retamal reports from Caracas.
This popular pharmacy has reopened in the south of Caracas. People come with their prescriptions in order to get antibiotics, medications for hypertension, diabetes, and food supplements for pregnant women.
I've been here several times. This is the third time I've come. I've already received 3 different types of medication since they've reopened: omeprazole, atorvastatin, and now antibiotics.
There is simply not enough money for me to buy medication. It costs a lot of money, and even with my pension, it's not enough.
More than 15,000 people have received free medicine in almost 2 months of operation. Economic sanctions have directly influenced Venezuela's ability to guarantee healthcare as a social right to citizens. This has negatively impacted millions of people here in Venezuela. According to data from the Pan American Health Organization, up until 2016, Venezuela had improved all of its health indicators, including vaccination plans and access to medical care. The Bolivarian Republic also reduced the prevalence of diseases.
A country in economic crisis is one with fewer resources, and those resources are not sufficient to cover the hospital's demands. When you don't have sufficient medicines, when you don't have enough supplies, operating problems at the hospital are exacerbated. In an economic crisis, people are more vulnerable because they do not eat what they are supposed to eat. They get weaker, lose weight, hygiene norms have changed. Issues with the water supply and electrical problems also become more aggravated.
Russia delivered 7.5 tons of medicine to Venezuela on February 21, 2019. To remedy this critical situation, on March 29th, 65 tons arrived from China, and on April 16th, 24 tons from the International Red Cross. According to data from the Health Ministry, Venezuela approved a more than €600 million investment in medicines.
In addition to this commercial agreement for the purchase of supplies, medicines, and surgical equipment, they are making donations through the Humanitarian Technical Assistance Program.
The medicines are stored in this automated warehouse where they store generic medicines from the list of essential drugs.
The storing of medicines at the facility is guided by the Minister of Health and not by a commercial need.
The distribution of medicines to the national public health sector via integral diagnostic centers, hospitals, and social security institutions is controlled and monitored from this room. The objective is to standardize the access and availability of medicines for the Venezuelan people.
Electricity has been restored to the building of the Venezuelan embassy in Washington, D.C. The lights were switched on hours after the Metropolitan Police invaded the diplomatic premises and took away members of the Embassy Protection Collective who were inside. Last Thursday, the electricity was cut while water was shut off 2 days later in an attempt to smoke out those defending the rights of the government of Venezuela. At a court hearing today, a judge approved the release of the 4 activists who were arrested after being removed from the embassy. According to reports, they were all charged with a misdemeanor interfering with a federal law enforcement agent engaged in protective functions. The charge carries a maximum of 1 year in jail and a $1,000 fine. Our correspondent in Washington, D.C., Jorge Gestoso, sent us this report before the hearing.
The activists who stayed inside the Venezuelan embassy in Washington will soon be taken to court to face charges of interfering in the protection of an embassy. The activists have been in police custody since they were arrested on Thursday, put in police vehicles, and taken away from the building. The embassy remains closed off by the police. There are also a lot of officers deployed in the area. The Embassy Protection Collective, formed by 3 human rights organizations, Code Pink, Popular Resistance, and Answer Coalition, had the goal of protecting and defending the embassy from opposition attacks. However, the police broke in and violated the Vienna Convention. This morning, in an exclusive interview with Telesur, the Venezuelan Foreign Minister, Jorge Ariasa, said the United States chose Switzerland to take over control of the Venezuelan embassy in Washington. Ariasa said the Venezuelan government proposed Turkey. Meanwhile, on Thursday, Juan Guaido's envoy in the U.S., Carlos Vecchio, showed up in front of the embassy and said that the opposition will wait for an unspecified period of time before entering the building. The Reverend Jesse Jackson has called this another chapter in the coup d'etat by the U.S. against Venezuela. And the most troubling part is that this situation sets a precedent regarding the violation of embassies and sovereign territories. If it happened in Venezuela, it can happen somewhere else, too.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. Teachers and health workers in Honduras have continued their protests against the privatization of public education and health care. Our correspondent in Tegucigalpa, Gilda Silvestrucci, has the details.
Teachers and doctors are continuing their protests this Friday in case the government attempts to reduce their labor rights and gains, including the retirement age. They are also protesting against the attempt to privatize both public education and the healthcare system, in line with demands by the International Monetary Fund. This was part of an agreement which President Juan Orlando Hernández signed recently for the IMF to provide $311 million. As part of their protests, they have been holding assemblies and suspended non-essential care for patients as well as classes across the country.
We thank Gilda for that report. Pope Francis has accepted the resignation of Brazilian Bishop Wilson Dias de Oliveira. The bishop is reportedly under investigation for alleged extortion and covering up sexual abuse. In April, he also admitted to police he had taken $4,000 from church funds for personal use, claiming he was having financial difficulties. Pope Francis passed a decree this month making it mandatory for clergy to report sexual abuse. Ecuador is awaiting the outcome of an investigation into WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange's belongings at its London embassy before considering possible legal actions against him. President Lenín Moreno claims Assange repeatedly violated his asylum conditions, leaked information about his personal life, and possibly used the embassy for spying, though he's provided no evidence to back up those allegations. The investigation is based on a legal agreement between Ecuador and the United States.
Of course, the Ecuadorian state will act with respect to the evidence that Assange carried out actions outside the law and territory. In a space within the territory of the Ecuadorian state, of course the Ecuadorian state can act on this. And not just the state, but also judicial authorities can start proceedings.
The Senate in Uruguay has voted against the removal of 4 military generals who served on an army court of honor, which investigates crimes that occurred during the dictatorship of the 1980s. The opposition rejected the president's proposal to have them dismissed in a vote on Wednesday. However, relatives of people who disappeared under military rule are criticizing the decision.
Combating impunity in Uruguay was never easy. This time, senators blocked another opportunity to clean up the image of the armed forces. With the opposition votes, the senators rejected a request to remove the 4 generals who sit in the honor court that judged the case of the soldiers José Gavazo, Jorge Silveira, and Luis Maurente for their crimes during the dictatorship.
First, the opposition wanted the minutes so they can delay the vote. We gave them the minutes. Then they wanted to call the generals, but that was not possible. Then they wanted other things. I think they were only making excuses for not showing in public that the opposition doesn't want to approve these sackings, which are a result of these generals not following the law.
It was President Tabare Vázquez who sent the request to fire the generals to Congress after the confessions of the former soldier, José Niño Gavazo, went before the honor court. Gavazo confessed to crimes against people arrested during the dictatorship. The court decided that Gavazo's behavior did not tarnish the honor of the armed forces.
They cannot say one thing first and another thing later. That is what they have always done, so it does not surprise us. But people need to know what is really happening, so they can take a decision to support democracy and the truth. They always play tricks and twist things around.
The vote by the opposition parties was interpreted by the lawmaker Macarena Gilman, granddaughter of the Argentinian poet Juan Gilman, as another sign that the opposition supports impunity. It also set a grave precedent by overriding the president and keeping the generals in place.
They have been very consistent. The opposition has supported immunity for years, so they are just doing the same. We were hopeful, of course, that they might change because of the seriousness of the situation, but they didn't.
The Senate needed a 3/5 majority to approve the sacking. That is 18 votes. The Broad Front Party has 16 votes, but the opposition blocked it with 15. So the generals Claudio Romano, Carlos Sequeira, Alejandro Salaberry and Gustavo Fajardo will continue in their posts. However, we are still waiting to see how President Vasquez responds.
In 2017, the wider Caribbean region, including Puerto Rico and Cuba, suffered over $98 billion in damage caused by storms. The startling statistic was revealed at the 19th meeting of the Monitoring Committee of the Caribbean Development and Cooperation Committee. Caribbean diplomats attending the meeting underway in Trinidad and Tobago are discussing ways to reposition vulnerable, highly indebted, small island developing states in the face of these natural disasters.
For the Caribbean, we estimate costs in excess of $7 billion. But when we add Puerto Rico and Cuba, it takes us to about $98 billion, of which Cuba was $13 billion and Puerto Rico about $68 billion. These are enormous sums of money in a region in which access to concessional finance has been in decline.
Another serious challenge facing the Caribbean region is low economic growth and stubbornly high debt amid difficult IMF adjustments. The issue also underpinned discussions at IDLAC's Monitoring Committee meeting.
The international environment has not been very supportive. As you know, commodity prices have not been very good. And countries like Trinidad and Tobago, for example, depend heavily on hydrocarbon, have suffered as a consequence. And more generally, tourism economies, which were not doing as well, are doing a little better now. So overall, the performance of the region has moved up a little, but as I say, growth is anemic. A big part of the problem of low growth has to do with the declining exports. Export capacity in the region has been on decline. And if you look at the two periods, 2000 and up to 2010 and 2010 to 2015, you see the difference. But also look at the Caribbean relative to other regions. We're doing very badly.
The European Union has removed Barbados, Bermuda, and Aruba from its blacklist of tax havens. The three Caribbean islands were blacklisted in March for failing to change their tax rules for months. Aruba has been removed completely because it has changed its legislation to make it compliant with EU requirements. Meanwhile, Barbados and Bermuda have committed to address the issue and been moved to a so-called grey list of countries still under EU scrutiny for their tax rules. In an effort to increase tourism and foreign investment, Barbados plans to remove entry visa requirements for certain countries in Africa and other parts of the world. Foreign Minister Jerome Walcott says this applies to countries such as Jordan, Iran, Qatar, and areas in Asia such as Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, and India. Ethiopia, Cameroon, Ghana, Burkina Faso, Morocco, Senegal, and Rwanda are also on the list. Barbados is also set to open its High Commission in Ghana by year-end to extend its diplomatic reach to Africa. Nearly a year after a tragic plane crash in Cuba, investigators have concluded that the accident that left 112 dead was caused by the crew miscalculating the weight and balance of the aircraft.
The Institute of Civil Aeronautics of Cuba today recognizes the cooperation of all the people and institutions around the investigation, as well as the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, the Boeing manufacturer of the United States, as well as the Aeronautical Authority of Mexico.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. Protesters in Sudan have cleared roadblocks following an army decision to suspend talks on installing civilian rule. On Thursday, the chief of Sudan's ruling military council announced the talks had been suspended for 72 hours due to what he says deteriorating security. He also demanded that protesters dismantle barricades, open bridges, and railway lines connecting. Protesters said the army was trying to provoke them by delaying the negotiations.
We have removed the bricks according to an agreement and they have given 3 days. And if our demand is made yes, we leave the bricks. But if they do not respond to our demands, then we will bring the bricks back again. And we hope that it will remain as our symbol, to stand for a peaceful demonstration to achieve one's goal of freedom, peace and order. And the demonstration is the right of the youth.
A court in Kenya has found former President Daniel Arap Moi guilty of land grabbing. Moi, who ruled from 1978 and 2002, has been ordered to pay $10 million to the rightful owners of property he illegally sold to a timber firm in 2007. His lawyers claim the land was his to sell. However, the judge upheld a claim from the family of a now deceased local chief who accused Moi of abusing his position to seize the property from him in 1983. The Rwanda Investigation Bureau has paraded before the media a leading member of a rebel movement. Calixte Nsabimba is accused of acts of terrorism and he faces life imprisonment, in line with the country's new terrorism law. Sabimana, the spokesman for National Liberation Front, appeared in public for the first time since he was captured in Comoros on April 13th and secretly handed to Rwandan authorities. He was previously declared war on the Rwandan government. A villa in Misrata, Libya has turned into a hive of activity of mothers to prepare food parcels with messages for sons battling on the outskirts of the capital. More than 10,000 food parcels are being sent each day 200 kilometers away to the front for the unrecognized fighters in south of Tripoli. Around 100 women work in two-day shifts a day.
For our sons and for the sake of the nation, we are ready to pay a dear price for the homeland, and for Misrata especially, because it gave us a lot of and it is our duty to give back, even if it's a small part of what our children have given us and what this good country has given us.
Palestinian officials say a group of Jewish settlers in the occupied West Bank has intentionally torched several acres of Palestinian farmland. According to the officials, the fire caused extensive damage to agricultural land sown with wheat and olives. Palestinians living in the West Bank are frequent victims of attacks and acts of vandalism by Israeli settlers. And thousands of Palestinians in the occupied East Jerusalem have participated in prayers of the second Friday of Ramadan at the Al-Aqsa Mosque. The prayers took place under intense security measures by Israeli security forces. Men over 40, children under 13, and women of all ages are allowed to enter East Jerusalem without permits for the Friday prayers. Men under 40, however, are banned. The Al-Aqsa Mosque compound is the third holiest site in Islam. And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.